So hello, I'm Olivia and I'm the host of the podcast Panic and Me, and today we have a guest who I met before in my virtual internship over the summer with the civil service. So it's so lovely to catch up with you and to see you again. Just for the sake of kind of everybody watching, could you give us a little introduction to yourself and what you do and kind of how you got to where you are now?
Yeah, of course. So my name is Anastasia. As Olivia said, I met Olivia when she was working at the civil service over summer. I'm a fast streamer at the civil service, so it's kind of that graduate program, and you kind of rotate around the different departments and do work in different kind of public service roles. Before that, I was at Durham University and I grew up in Cheshire, now living in London and working in London technically, although like most people, I've been working in my kitchen for a good while now.
Yeah. So I think we're going to talk a little bit about kind of working from home because the pandemic, I suppose like your graduate scheme isn't necessarily what you imagined it to be since the pandemic hit.
No, that's totally right. A massive element of this graduate scheme, but I think any graduate scheme is the social element to it, and kind of you go into a scheme with a cohort and you're moving through the scheme with them, so you do expect to be meeting new people and interacting with them in person all the time, which is certainly how I experienced the first part of my grad scheme. So that's definitely different, and also just day to day. I think when you first start out in work, you're learning so much just from the environment that you're in, from the people that you're working with and the conversations you overhear. So I think learning is harder during learning in a professional sense is made more challenging in a home working environment. So yeah, definitely a little bit different to what I expected.
Yeah, and I mean, it was a similar thing, I suppose, to a lesser degree for me during like my internship, right? Because I was expecting to have to move potentially to London or another part of the country for a couple of months and kind of meet people face to face, but I ended up doing it in my bedroom, for a couple of months. But I still found that people tried their hardest to create that social element. So we had like coffee breaks on Zoom and things like that. Do you still find that within the graduate scheme or?
Yeah, definitely. I'm very much a people person. I love to have kind of face-to-face contact with other people. So I have definitely noticed that kind of like as a gap. But saying that, the civil service and everyone that I work with has been so proactive in trying to plug it to the best that they can with things like informal chats and trying to recreate those water cooler moments that you only really get in the office. And that has been a massive plus. And there are benefits to working at home as well. So it's definitely not all bad, but I do think it's important to recognise that it's quite, it can be challenging. And it's not necessarily the case that virtual communication and working with people virtually can replace everything. I think we've come on so fast, so quickly, so quickly in the civil service to adapt and to harness virtual technology and the opportunities that provides us to build relationships with other people and continue working collaboratively. But I don't know, I just love to be in front of someone and just like chatting to them.
Yeah, because when I was working in the Department for Education over the summer, there was lots of people kind of saying, oh, I can't wait to get back to the office, and saying kind of like there were people at that time, it was looking a little bit more positive and people were going back to the office for a couple of days, and now obviously we've had kind of the stay at home order again, and it's I think a little bit difficult for people, isn't it? Also just the uncertainty of it, like we don't know when we'll be back in the office, which is difficult. How has the pandemic affected your life in general? I mean, so many things, I imagine, but
Yeah, so probably like everyone, the pandemic just kind of turned our lives upside down, didn't it? I think it's so strange because you go through your life, and especially people of our generation, we've never really had any episodes where we've not been in control of what we wanted to do and where we were going and how we wanted to live our life. So I think that's been a massive adjustment for everyone that I know, and I include myself in that. So kind of to be told that you need to stay in your house and you're not allowed to leave, that is wild when you think about it. And the implications that has on your relationships and your freedoms, it's just limitless. So I think I probably, like everyone, struggled to kind of come to terms with that. I think initially I got through it fine by just thinking, oh, it's only very temporary, it's only very short term. And that did get me through the first lockdown, probably. I think it was probably a little bit after when things kind of started to go back to normal, and then we had another clampdown. I probably struggled more in those periods because I kind of thought we were done with COVID. Obviously, I knew that we weren't, but it felt as though we'd all been through something in the first lockdown and we'd come out of it. So to then revert and go back into all the strict measures and then the lockdowns, I found quite intense. And I've really had to be quite proactive in terms of protecting my own mental health and well-being in this period.
Yeah. So what kind of advice would you have for others to kind of maintain their well-being, either generally or while working from home during the pandemic? What has helped you?
So generally speaking, I think just having an awareness of yourself and what you need and what positively versus negatively impacts your well-being is really important. And that's something that I don't think I ever thought of in such a conscious way until this whole period. Because I think our well-being has really come into such sharp focus in this difficult time. So kind of understanding what works for me versus what doesn't, and being quite proactive and trying to make sure that I am doing the things that I know I need to do in order to keep myself on kind of like a level. And that it's difficult to kind of give advice because that looks so different for everyone. Like my sister loves taking bubble baths. I just get hot and I just like don't find it a relaxing experience. But I know that if I go outside and just take a gentle walk, stick a podcast in, I will definitely feel better after that. So kind of just tailoring the way that you live your life in order to best support yourself.
And I mean, something that can be helpful if you don't know how or what improves your mood is, so for a week, and this was something my therapist recommended, was for a week I had to write down every single activity I'd done and the impact it had on my mood. And that can be a way, because some people I think don't know even really what helps. So if you have to go right back to basics, it can be really helpful to just take note of what improves your mood and what doesn't. Like for me, I realized that kind of something that really increases my mood is just bringing the guinea pigs in and like holding them, which was just something I hadn't been conscious about before. But I think your point about being really conscious about what improves your mood and what makes you, like the news is a big one. People will read the news and it will make you feel bad, and just being really conscious about that and not doing what makes you feel bad and doing what makes you feel better is really important. And even for me, like I have to be particularly conscious at the moment about, with the kind of uni being online, trying to make that divide between work and relaxing and sleep and things like that.
I think coming back to your original question about working from home, I think when when you're working from home, whether it's in a job or for university,
Mhm.
or if you're in education at a lower stage, I think trying to protect your boundaries is really important, and does have such a big impact. And you might not notice at first that you're just working a bit later, or
Mhm.
that you're kind of not feeling as though you've got any divide in between work and play or work and rest, and trying to kind of ring fence your free time and things, I
Mhm.
think is really, really
Yeah.
important.
Yeah, and it kind of comes back to what everyone says about routine, isn't it? Kind of having that time where you, no matter how much work you've got on, you're going to rest during that time and try to go to sleep at similar times. And it's amazing what that can do for your well-being, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, kind of like staying on top of this kind of like working topic. Obviously you were, what was you, my buddy and my mentor during the internship?
Yeah, all of the
Yeah,
above. They can
all of the
attach
above. So you're a
me.
couple of years like ahead of me in the whole kind of being a graduate thing. So, and obviously at the moment in terms of like mental health and the job market and just uncertainty in general for graduates is really hard. So I wondered if you had like any advice for kind of up and coming or really recent graduates, of how to deal with this uncertainty and difficulty.
Yeah, that's such a good question.
Mhm.
I think you're so right to acknowledge it. And well before any of this COVID stuff came into play, I did some work with Mind, the mental health charity, about, and the aim of the work was trying to develop some resources and materials for students moving into that kind of limbo period where they're trying to figure out what they want to do and what their options are. And honestly, one of the biggest tips I'd give to someone is recognize that this period is actually really quite challenging for a person's mental health, and that you may well experience kind of complex emotions around the whole thing, because it's a massive kind of transition period, and as a human, as a person, you may well find that challenging. And so recognizing that it might be difficult, and showing yourself some compassion in relation to that, is really, really key. I know that sounds a little bit woolly, but just allowing yourself to feel, I think is quite important. And in terms of managing the uncertainty, you're right, it is really tricky. But focusing on things that you can control and the way in which you respond to things, they are things that are within your grasp, within your kind of sphere of influence, and focusing on those things might just help you deal with the external situation that you can't necessarily control a little bit easier.
Yeah, and I mean that's given me so much to think about. But yeah, kind of on your second point of focusing on what you can control, it goes back to what we were saying before, doesn't it? Even if all that you can control is the small routine of day-to-day life, then control that to the best of your ability to kind of help cope. But I think your point about compassion towards yourself is so important as well. Dama and I have filmed a lot of these podcasts now, and we almost in every video we find ourselves coming back to the point of being kind to yourself. And obviously Dama, I think Dama finds it helpful to think of it as kind of talking to yourself as your best friend or as a friend. And I kind of find it helpful to think of it as kind of talking to yourself almost like a child, not in a patronizing way, but in a way that we're all vulnerable, especially at this time. And yeah, I think compassion is so important, especially at the moment. If you can't find a job straight away, or it's not how you had envisioned it, it's important to remember that we're doing great by just getting through the days, really.
Absolutely, I definitely agree with everything you just said. And I really like the idea of talking to yourself as if you're a best friend, as you would to a best friend. I have two sisters, and we're incredibly close, and we're very supportive of one another. And my older sister said to me the other day, wouldn't it be amazing if we could just treat ourselves the way that we treat each other.
Mm-hmm.
And if you think about it, there really is nothing stopping you from showing yourself that level of empathy and it wouldn't even be empathy, I don't think, it's to yourself, but showing yourself that level of love and kindness and support, because these are tough times and we're all going through them, and we need to look out for ourselves as well as other people.
Yeah, and we'll end up, doing better if we are gentle with ourselves, I think. We're all trying our best, and we know more than anyone how hard we're all trying, if that makes sense. And it's important to kind of, I journal sometimes or write notes in my phone a lot. And kind of reading back on old notes kind of in when I was a teenager a lot, kind of thinking, did I actually talk to myself like that? And you have to make a mental effort, I think, sometimes to kind of when you're speaking to yourself harshly or expecting too much of yourself, to kind of catch those thoughts, and remind yourself to be kind. But it is very true. It's kind of, I sense like your overarching point is just about being very mindful of your well-being and of what you need.
I don't know if you've this book that I go back to time and time again. It's called The Toolkit for Modern Life. It's by Emma Hepburn, Dr. Emma Hepburn. She just has she comes from a position whereby everyone has mental health, and it's not just the absence of mental illness. It's mental health is something for everyone to be proactively managing all the time. And I think that's so true. And so a lot of the techniques and tips that she talks about revolve around this concept of being mindful of yourself and what you can do to support yourself. And for example, she has this concept of the capacity cup. You might have heard about it in other settings, but it's basically this idea that we all have like a finite amount of stuff that we can deal with in our minds and in our lives. And once that starts to overflow, we start to unravel. And it's applicable to absolutely everyone. Everyone kind of knows when they're, well, I don't know if you do know, but if
you might start feeling overwhelmed.
Feeling of overwhelm and burnout, and you just you can't do things anymore, and it's because you're trying to deal with just too much. And it's so the response is to try and think, what aspects of what I'm dealing with right now can I just put down for a while? Can I stop thinking about, or can I remove, for example, can I push back on a deadline that's really stressing me out, or can I meet a friend who always makes me feel better, because that'll give me a bit more space in my capacity cup. Just trying to really be aware of how you're interacting with the world and how that might be impacting you.
Yeah, because it's so important to be able to say no as well when you're reaching capacity, or to be able to delegate to somebody else and trust other people to take on tasks that you don't have the capacity for. So it's a really, really important point. Brilliant. Thank you so much for talking to me today. I think we've covered some really interesting things. And yeah, I'm really, really, really happy. So I'll see you. I'll just stop recording. Goodbye.